Hello and welcome to The Exchange.
Today we will be discussing how to avoid the slide of an affair.
Often it's the little things that go unnoticed that can lead to a big break of trust.
Marriage is under attack, and the enemy has shown its head as the 7-year itch and social media. Divorce rates show an increase around the 7-year mark. Partners getting bored of their marriage and ultimately dooming their relationship. Social media is also a diabolical factor. Never before has it been easier to get in contact with an old flame. What might start out as an innocent catch-up leads to total destruction. With all these attacks, how can you protect your relationship?
Joining us on the program is Lifeworks branch manager Nick Valentine. Lifeworks is a not-for-profit organisation that provides family, couple and individual counselling, education, training and workplace services in Victoria. Nick, it's great to have you back on The Exchange.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Also joining Nick is his colleague Wendy Driscoll. Wendy is a Lifeworks counsellor and educator. Wendy develops and facilitates a broad range of rehabilitation programs for the community. Welcome back, Wendy.
It's delightful to be here.
I think it's going to be a great conversation. Tell us today, how many people either get involved in affairs or contemplate affairs, do you think?
This is quite a difficult one to answer, and I think the reason for that is that what exactly is an affair?
I think that's a superb thing to talk about, because one of the things that we were just talking about earlier on, Nick, was, you know, the whole idea that if you're in a relationship, can you actually admit that someone of the opposite sex is attractive?
Absolutely.
And it not be considered as you wanting to slide into an affair?
Yeah, good question. And I think more and more we're towing the line, and we're seeing couples who border on the edge of what is an affair. And I think, like Wendy said, the definition is changing, and the stats are divided for that very reason.
I mean, we were saying, you know, I think it's good to acknowledge, like we were saying, our floor manager here is very attractive because he looks like, you know, like George Clooney. Our director looks like Fabio, you know, and that's okay to say they're attractive men or attractive women, but it doesn't mean that they're not happily married. We're not happily married, and you're scared to even acknowledge different things in the opposite sex.
Yeah. How would you define then an affair in current culture?
Very, very good question. I guess that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because, I mean, there's the obvious one about having sex with another partner that's not your own. And I really think that the definition is subjective in some ways, because more and more things like social media and the internet certainly increase our accessibility. And, you know, for me, it depends on the agreements that you have with your partner. You know, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable.
Would you find it acceptable for your partner to say that person is attractive?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's honest.
Yeah, and look, that for different people, that might create insecurity, and it's about how you work through that. But, you know, I think affairs is more so when it leads onto the deception side of things, or we've discussed it a few seasons ago with privacy and secrecy. When it borders on the secrecy side, I think that's when questions need to be asked.
What is getting on the edge?
Getting on the edge is probably where you wouldn't be comfortable, for example, sharing the conversations you have with your platonic friend with your partner. If you might not be comfortable if they saw a DVD of your last meeting. If you might be telling your platonic friend that things that you perhaps are not sharing with your partner, that's when you're definitely on that slippery slope, I would say, Nick.
Yeah.
So would you be saying it's a different level of intimacy?
It's starting to slide into that different level of intimacy, and it's very difficult to detect exactly when it goes. It happens very slowly sometimes.
Well, you mentioned the internet a few minutes ago. How has that changed things?
Again, I think it's increased accessibility. So more than ever, we're able to connect with people all around the world, whether it be long lost loves, past friends, or even strangers. And I think that's the other thing, is that we can do it in secrecy. And I think for some people, you know, that the behavioural rationalisation, as you like, is a lot easier. And so people can justify to themselves that they're doing nothing wrong. But I think what Wendy said is a really good point. If you would be uncomfortable for your partner to be privy to that conversation or even that relationship, then that's probably crossing a boundary.
Okay, so that should be a red flag then in that case. What are some of the reasons people are tempted to have an affair, Wendy?
Oh, well, there are quite a few, I think, and perhaps here it's helpful to say, is it an intentional way we're going about this, or is it unintentional?
Well, certainly we were shocked to find out that there are websites out there set up for married people to go onto, to hook up, to have an affair with another married person.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who this is an intentional thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for those type of cases, obviously there's something going wrong in the relationship. And I think that's important to take into account.
What are some of the drivers? What are some of the things that are going wrong?
Yeah, well, for me, relationship satisfaction. I mean, they talk about the 7-year itch, and they talk about other sort of, I guess, milestones that we see patterns of in relationships. But, you know, I think for me that, you know, it depends with each couple. And the reality is that, you know, I think what you said before, again, going back to when the boundaries, when you're not comfortable for your partner to know about it, there's probably a boundary being crossed. And I think all that gets set up at the start of a relationship.
So if you're tempted to have an affair, or if you are having one, at what point should you come clean and tell your partner?
If you are having one, or if you haven't had one,
Well,
let's
either
clarify
way.
that.
Let's take, first of all, you're feeling tempted, or you're drawn to a person, and you'd like to maybe follow through. At what point should you go to your partner and say, hey, there's a problem here?
I would say the earlier the better, and it depends how you've set up your relationship. When you've gone into this commitment, have you discussed what an affair means and what you'd do if one of you was tempted? And that's what we do in pre-marriage education. We get couples to open up on these things. So I would do it the earlier the better, and if necessary, seek help.
Yep. Nick?
For me, Robert, it goes to, I guess, what's your intention and what's your hope for the relationship? Because for us, I guess, as couple counsellors, that it needs to be, particularly if you want to rebuild that relationship, the coming clean and disclosing, if you like, has to be an inevitable part. In fact, it's the first stage, and then I always say that forgiveness is a process, not an event. And I think that thereafter, that building and that rebuilding takes a lot of time, and the person that has been cheated on, often it gets to call the shots, I think, in terms of what's going to help them to feel more comfortable moving forward and what boundaries need to be in place, and that might be really rigid at the start.
Yeah, I love what you just said about forgiveness being a process. I don't want to generalise, obviously, but is that more a male thing, thinking that, well, I've said I'm sorry, so everything's okay now? Or is that across the board?
Yeah, I think so, and you know, we can't exclude here, I guess, the sort of creation and the co-contribution of things like power and control issues in relationships and male privilege and male entitlement. That, you know, that you can even take it as far as, well, I can do this. You know, and we often hear about men who don't want their partner even going out with friends, yet they might be having really inappropriate relationships on the internet. So it's really interesting, that sort of power and control, the unequal gender balance and expectations about what's right for men and women also come into it.
Yeah. So someone's had an affair. What impact would that have on a marriage? Wendy?
Very often devastating, particularly if the person who's hurt, the hurt partner, I like to call them, if I can clarify that, the unfaithful partner, the hurt partner, and then the affair partner, and that's the way we can speak about this. But very often if the hurt partner has bought in to a relationship that is committed and we stand together and we don't cross the line, then for them it's devastating, because have I lived a lie? What have the last 10, 15 years been? For them it's, who am I? So it's gut-wrenching. And it doesn't just end with the hurt partner. What about if there are children involved? They're devastated. And then there's the actual affair partner and her family if they find out about it. So the spiral in the family is huge.
Yeah.
Nick, do you think that there are some people that are predisposed to being unfaithful, or just the kind of guy or girl that you go, don't go there?
Look, I mean, certainly there's signs. You know, we hear about serial cheaters. I mean, there's no genetic basis to cheating, but certainly our modelling and what we've been exposed to growing up, even our past relationships and how we've behaved, and maybe how people in relationship we've been in relationship with have behaved, certainly set us up for the future and play a part. I think it's a really good point, Christy, in terms of there are people out there that you do get that intuition about and that you do get that funny feeling, and it might be in their behaviour and that overconfidence or that flirtatiousness when they're in a relationship, and certainly that's there. But, you know, I think I mean, human beings are complex, and who knows whether those type of people would even cross the line.
And what we in Australia consider flirtatious is normal in Europe. And, you know, you go into an Italian cafe and they're still calling you beautiful at 60.
That's why
you know,
goes to Italian
I go to Italian cafes all the time.
All the time.
And I can walk up to a guy and say, "You're looking really well," and I have no intentions of, you know, it going any further than that. 70, did you hear that? But, you know, and I think being honest, like, I'll say to Rob, "Oh, guy said I looked really well today." And Rob said, "Yeah, was he 70 and blind?" I said, "No, he was 40 and gorgeous." And just being, you know, just being really open, because if we expect that one person is ever going to meet all our needs, then we're crazy.
Spot on.
But we've made a choice that that is going to be the person.
Spot on. First of all, really good answer to Rob.
No offence,
Thank you.
But,
yeah, could you believe that, 70 and blind?
But what I think is important here too, and you raise a really good point, it depends on each relationship. What might be okay for one relationship and one couple might not be okay for another. And I think that's really important. And again, it's about the parameters that you set early on in the relationship. And it's not a matter of you need to do this and I expect you to do this. It's a matter of saying, here are my triggers, here are my insecurities, this is what would help, and what happens when this happens, how do we resolve things together? So it's really setting that up from the start. So things like affairs are very clear what is a fair and what's not a fair.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a break and we'll be back with more and Street Talk right after this.
Why do you think a person will cheat on their partner?
I don't know, they might not be happy.
Thinking that the grass is greener on the other side, and perhaps the thrill of it all.
They would be dissatisfied with the relationship.
And what do you think could be some of the factors that contribute to that?
Over familiarity, lack of things in common. Sometimes people grow apart.
Why do you think a person would cheat on their partner?
That is an interesting question.
I think probably, if they do, it's that they don't have any commitment in the first place.
I think often they're discontent with the situation that they're in, or they're looking for more in life.
Look, I think it comes down to quite a lot of reasons. I don't think many justifiable, but I mean, it can be frustration with the way the relationship's going.
I think because of their own insecurities.
I don't know, I suppose maybe they're a bit unhappy in a relationship, or insecurity as well.
And do you think things like social media could contribute too?
Not really. I think the only way it can make it is maybe it makes it easier to facilitate contact with other people. But in terms of feelings and stuff, I don't think it changes how you feel.
I don't really think so. People know what they're doing is right or wrong. You know, media or no media, they're going to do it anyway.
I'm not a big social media user, so I prefer to just go out and meet people myself, not on, not in my age group anyway.
I think that a lot of times these days with the growing social media outlets and stuff, and how much time people spend on them, people are really forgetting about the one-on-one time between the people and listening to each other's feelings and seeing reactions and judging stuff by that.
I think they do a bit, for sure. I mean, everybody's social media page, people post pictures that they want other people to find attractive, like they do it for attention. It's possible. I could imagine people sort of, I guess as they get older, sort of rekindling, thinking back in an idealistic way to their sort of previous, early boyfriends, past relationships, and sort of thinking that they were better than the rut they may be in.
Possibly, yeah, there's always, things that could tempt you online.
Probably yes, because it's more accessible. You don't even have to leave your home and get online and cheat that way.
I know they say once a cheater, always a cheater.
Welcome back. We're discussing avoiding the slide of an affair with Lifeworks' Nick Valentine and Wendy Driscoll. And Sandra, our Street Talk reporter, welcome.
Well,
What a
good to be
fascinating
here.
question to be out on the street asking people.
Absolutely. I'm having a giggle.
Brave.
The thought of going back to some of your, childhood boyfriends is just like,
Yeah,
no.
I've met a couple of yours. I ended up counselling them.
I was just relieved that anyone wanted to talk to me on that topic. So it was good. It was good that we got
What
to
really
talk to
stood
some
out to
people.
you in those discussions?
Oh, look, really a mixed bag of answers. But what came across a couple of times was insecurity, that a person would have an affair because of an insecurity, which I thought was, quite interesting. I don't know if that's actually the case. I'd be interested to hear from either of you.
Yeah, look, for me, I was just reflecting through that street talk. What we said earlier was about relationship dissatisfaction, but that lady raised a good point. It can be thrill-seeking. And also, I think I made an assumption when I said, communication at the start of a relationship can be really healthy. But often the communication can be a real issue in a relationship. And in fact, it's that disconnection that might lead someone to be open to an affair. They might not necessarily go looking for it, but they might be open to it.
They may not go looking for it. I was in Malaysia and this guy walks up to me. He turns out, Rob again said, was he, 70? He was a merchant banker, adorable. He walks up to me and said, "You take my breath away." I said, that's exactly what my husband says to me all the time. Meanwhile, noting, "Please remember to say to me." But I could see how,
And now I'm scared not to.
I was with a group of people. But I could see how that sort of scenario with someone who hadn't made a decision and wouldn't, could easily open doors for affairs, for a thrill-seeking. You're away in another country.
So it's kind of
scary
flattery,
stuff.
really. Is flattery a big part in it, Wendy?
Yes, flattery is a big part, and I think it can turn into something else as well. Sometimes we can be in very happily married situations and the flattery can be exciting. Think of a mirror. If today we work in wonderful workplaces, we meet interesting, intelligent people who are vibrant, and sometimes they can stimulate us in an area that we haven't been stimulated before. We're working on a project, and the next minute we see ourselves mirrored instead of the wonderful, normal, home-loving person with the children and the dog and the cat in the car. Suddenly we see ourselves as 18 again.
But isn't that the time where you go, yes, but I'm not, and I love what I have? It's like the comfy slippers.
It's kind of savouring the moment, though, isn't it?
One of the people said.
Yeah, somebody said the grass was greener.
The interesting bit with this is then you have a coffee because you have to discuss a meeting, and then you have another coffee, and then there's a dinner, and then you're working on a project. And so very slowly, even though you were not thinking of it, you're starting to meet this person more and more.
And enjoying their company,
And enjoying their company.
So where then, if you're enjoying the company, you're working on a project, you're in good communication with your spouse, I think what you were saying is when you stop that communication, that's where when you're in difficulty.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you said before, Christy, is why don't some people go, yes, but I'm happy in this relationship? That for a lot of couples, that's the case. For a lot of couples, it's not. And in fact, often through meeting someone unintentionally and having, like Wendy said, that sense of an experience of sensational overwhelm and flattery, it can actually lead to, almost a awakening of the issues of needs that aren't being met in relationships.
But even if it does awaken that, then can't the person just go, the grass is greener, like?
Yes, then there's insecurity, like that person was saying, because then you're insecure in the actual relationship that you have at home, which would make you want to seek something else.
Social media was downplayed, I thought, by a number of the people that you interviewed. Was that surprising to you, Wendy? Most of them said it makes it easier, but if an affair is going to happen, it's inevitable.
I was a little surprised about that, bearing in mind what the people who've come in to see me and how their relationships have started. And a lot of it has been reconnection with people from the past. And all you have to do is have a difficult period in your life. So we go through transitions in our couple lives. We go through spring, summers, autumn and winters. We can have a very ill parent. We could have other things that are taking our attention away. And in that little time, if something else pops up, it can suddenly creep in. So yes, certainly I think it's very easy to creep in.
Yeah, and so we need to have safeguards in place, I guess, with our social media use to stop the slide. Thank you, Sandra, for your input.
Great to be here.
As always, we are taking a break. Be back with more of The Exchange right after this. Welcome back. We're discussing how to avoid the slide of an affair with Nick Valentine and Wendy Driscoll. Wendy, I'll come back to you in regard to if you have a hunch that your partner is having an affair, what should you do about it? And if you confront them and they lie, what should you do about that? You've got this kind of sixth sense going on.
That's a very good question, and that happens to a lot of people. I know what I would do. From that part, I would certainly confront, and I would certainly ask about it.
And if you kind of just knew that you knew, women's intuition, and they came back and they go, no, I'm not. What would you do then?
I think I would suggest that I was looking for something a little bit more, and could we go and have a tune-up with our relationship? So I would probably suggest we go and did an Enrich course and see how he took that one on board.
Okay. Nick, would you add anything to that?
I would, Rob. I think for me, you've got to be careful not to be getting into the head clashes. I mean, that's a really tough one. And if you know something that proves, I guess, that the person is lying, then you have every right to put that on the table. If it's scepticism, I think it's important to speak from not an accusatory way, but from a perspective of, I'm actually feeling really insecure. And even when you give me assurances, I'm still feeling really uncomfortable and insecure, and I don't know what that's about, and I don't know how we can work on that together.
Okay, that's a really good way of going.
I mean, in your work, and even just personally, have you ever seen what you would have called the most unlikely situation end up in an affair, and then seen, when you look back on it in hindsight, seen some things that could have been preventable?
Absolutely.
And what were those things?
Excuse me. Absolutely. I think, for me, it's probably, and I'm not in touch with the people anymore, so I can say it, but they're people that I knew who would not have seen it coming. In fact, it was a long-term affair. And just, in public looked really connected and warm and just the perfect couple almost. But, I guess that points to that we really don't know the crust of a relationship. Only the two people in it do. And in hindsight, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but absolutely, I guess in my interactions with both of them thereafter, and they separated, but kept in touch with both of them, I certainly started to see elements of their behaviour that I wouldn't have seen before. And
So elements that led to that?
Alarm bells.
And what are those alarm bells?
For me, it was, the over-personability, the over-investment in connection, the over-conversation almost. And that's not to say that it's always meaning that they're having an affair, but for me, they're interesting things, and it's an important point to pick up too. For people who are often the person who was cheated on, that's often what Wendy said before, that's often what's so striking and so devastating for them, is that they actually didn't see it coming, and they look back in hindsight and think, well, maybe it was this, why didn't I pick up on this? It's hindsight, because I guess we like to think when we're in a relationship with someone, we give them the benefit of the doubt and we trust them.
Yeah. You mentioned there, interestingly enough, a long-term affair. What would that be versus a one-off? And is there any difference ultimately to a marriage or a relationship?
Yeah, really good question. I think each affair is different because the underlying reasons can be different. I think a long-term affair, for me, personally and professionally, it's harder to get my head around.
Yeah, because you've been living a lie.
Absolutely. And as an example, I remember I had a couple where that was happening, and I guess what put it in perspective for me was the man was the one who was cheating. And he had this it was a moral dilemma, that he can't separate from his wife, that it would go against all his values, morals and beliefs, and certainly would cause a rift in the family. And therefore he thought, in his judgment, it was better to stay in the relationship and keep being deceitful, which is really interesting.
So,
it's amazing how people justify it, isn't it?
Yeah. Where are some of the key places we need to protect ourselves? Like, we're thinking office parties, Christmas parties. What would you say to that, Wendy?
Yes, to keep open and to keep connected and telling each other what you're doing. So in places where perhaps there's alcohol served, where it's easier to fraternise, where we loosen our professional persona somewhat, and we're having fun, it's much easier to slide into things like that. So I think to make sure that you chat to your partner where you're going, what you're doing, not in a way that they're taking note of everything you're doing, but to be open and transparent, I think is the answer, so that you can share those things.
Just to finish off, I want to ask one last question for anyone who's watching this program and they're in an affair, either short-term, long-term, whatever it is, there's an element of unfaithfulness. What would you advise them, Nick?
I would say get help. And I think because, this affairs, there's only so far deception can go, is my belief. And I think that it's important to look at the underlying reasons, what's driving this, how did we get into this, and also what do I want for the future? Do I want to repair with my partner? Do I want to separate, and how's that going to look?
So getting help is seeking counsel. At some point in that time, I imagine the counsel would be to fess up to your other half, and at that point, of course, the relationship might end. That's a bit of a risk.
Yeah, I think it's subjective, and I think particularly though, certainly if you're wanting to, I guess, repair the relationship that you're in, then coming clean and disclosing has to be an inevitable part.
Yeah. Great advice.
And the good bit about that, if you have a really good counsellor, they're able to hold two people in the room when those sorts of things happen, and they keep it a safe place, and they can set the tone of how it's delivered.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And hopefully healing will be the result.
Yeah.
Wendy and Nick, thank you so much for your time on
Thank
The
you.
Exchange. It's been great. Thank you for watching. Please go to our website for a fact sheet, as well as more information about our show. Hope you can join us next time.
Bye for now.